Welcome back. I'm joined now by New Brunswick Premier Susan Holt ahead of the meeting of Canadian premiers here today in Toronto. Thank you so much.
Hey, it's my pleasure to be here.
Let me begin because obviously there's a lot at stake in this meeting because some premiers have expressed different viewpoints as to what should be done almost in retaliation to these tariffs that are being proposed by former President Trump. You had Ontario Premier Doug Ford suggest recently even cutting off energy to some border states. Does that move go too far, or are you perhaps supportive of that move?
Well, I think we have to look at all of the different ways that we can influence the U.S. to change their minds. And if Doug is in a position where he can shut off electricity, great. I hope he's not asking us to shut off our energy exports to the U.S. because that would be really devastating to our economy. So it's having that conversation about who can do what and how can we align it in order to get the ultimate outcome, which is convincing the Trump administration to reverse their position on tariffs.
Yeah, and I read somewhere that 92% of things made in New Brunswick are in many ways destined to end up in the United States. And so obviously these tariffs are going to play a big role for industries in your province. What can you do, I guess, in your position as Premier to try and help and support some of these industries who in many ways are going to be going through a challenging time come January 20th?
Yeah, those are conversations that we're having with our business community right now because you're exactly right. We're hugely dependent on the U.S. as our primary export market. And we've been doing some things to look at alternate export markets. There's certainly lots of demand for petroleum products everywhere around the world, but shifting those supply chains doesn't happen overnight. We're also really leveraging all of our allies, right? All the governors through the New England states, other business leaders in the U.S. see how damaging this could be to the American market, to the American people. And so we're trying to make that case, leveraging our business connections and our entrepreneurs' work in the U.S. To show the Trump administration that this is going to be it's going to have negative economic consequences for them. At the same time, we're talking to our seafood producers, our forestry industry, and others about what we might be able to do to put together the kind of supports that'll help alleviate some of the pain of the tariffs wherever they might land, if they land.
And talk to me a little bit about what people in your province, just average everyday people who maybe aren't business owners, can expect from these tariffs. Obviously, there's going to be further supply chain disruptions, which we saw a lot after COVID, but this will kind of only further, extend some of these problems. Obviously, the cost of living could go up in some ways. What should people in New Brunswick expect?
I mean, I'm worried about the impact on jobs, right? As the cost of seafood, for one, if we use the example of our lobster industry, which is near and dear to our hearts. If the cost of those lobsters is now high enough to the U.S. that the demand decreases, then we're not going to need as much processing, or our catch is not going to have its destinations, and that's going to impact the amount of people who work in that sector and whether we're going to be able to employ the same amount. And you'd say the same for forestry. If those products aren't going across the border or are so much more expensive to cross the border that we don't see the same demand, then I'm worried about the impact on jobs. And so it's New Brunswickers and their living. And while we have lots of job shortages in other sectors of the economy, the time to retrain and get people skilled up to move from one to another, well, that takes time and investment.
And you mentioned it in one of your earlier answers about exploring kind of alternate markets to, I guess, kind of recoup some of the profit that is being made right now and, kind of replacing that really large figure, as I mentioned earlier, 92%. What is the process, to do that look like, to look at other countries, to recoup such a large portion of where New Brunswick economy comes from?
Thankfully, it's not new, right? We have been working to diversify our trade markets for a long time, and when the Canada-Europe trade agreement came into place back, I think that was 6, 7, 8 years ago, we started our efforts to develop those markets, and we can ramp that up even further. We're actually seeing quite a bit more demand across Canada as well, so exporting from New Brunswick to our friends here in Ontario or out into the West or beyond, there's opportunity there for us that is a little bit logistically more accessible because we're not talking about shipping and going across the Atlantic Ocean. And then it's finding new markets, right? We're seeing interesting demand coming out of the African region. And so exploring places that could really use and appreciate our petroleum products, our forestry products, our seafood products, our agricultural products.
What role does the federal government play in supporting provinces like yourself during this type of a challenge?
Well, I think the key role that we want to see from the federal government right now is leadership on the response to the suggested tariffs and how we demonstrate clear action on our border security, how we're partnering in the fight against fentanyl, how we're demonstrating that economic impact to the U.S. and leveraging the business community. So we need our federal partners to lead this effort and help us all come together so that as we each do our own things with our own governors and our own connection, we have the kind of strong leadership that pulls it all together to get the result we're looking for.
Okay, we will leave it there. Premier Susan Holt, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks, Wyatt.